Here's some rules for working with signed numbers, adding and subtracting signed numbers. All right, let's start with adding a positive and a negative. So when we add a positive and a negative, the simple rule that we'll remember is subtract and take sign of bigger. And I write bigger in quotes because I really mean bigger in absolute value. That is, bigger when ignoring the sign. In the first example, we have a negative number, minus 10, and a positive 5, so we're going to add these. And the rule is subtract takes sign of bigger. So we're going to ignore the signs and subtract. 10 subtract 5 is 5, and the number that's bigger in absolute value is negative. So the answer is 5, and then we take on that negative sign. All right, the next example we're adding a negative 5 and a positive 10. So we'll subtract, ignore signs, subtract 10 minus 5 is 5. And the bigger number is positive, so this one is a positive 5. In the next example, positive, negative, we're going to subtract, take sign of bigger. So let's ignore signs and subtract. 10 minus 3 is 7. And since the larger in absolute value is negative, that would be a negative 7. And the next example, we have positive, negative. So subtract. 10 subtract 3 is 7. Since the larger is positive, that would be positive 7. Okay, so that's what we do when we're adding a positive and a negative. And now when we add a negative and a negative, we add in the usual way, and the answer is negative. So for example, if we have a negative 20, negative 30 and a negative 20, we add in the usual way, and we get negative 50. Okay, for subtraction, we're going to view, we have just one rule really. We view every subtraction problem as an addition. Now let's see what we mean by that. Let's say we have this problem here. We're doing 20 subtract 30. So we're going to take this negative symbol and attach it to the 30 and spread these numbers apart. So we have the 20, and then we have a negative 30, and then we're going to imagine a plus sign in between. So we turn it into an addition in that way. Again, attach the subtraction symbol to the second number, spread them apart, and we don't necessarily fill in this plus sign. We can just imagine that it's there. So when we look at this, we should see this as 20 plus minus 30. We shouldn't have to do this step. We should just see this as a 20 plus minus 30. Okay, so we're adding 20 and minus 30, so we're going to do the subtract take sign of bigger rule. So we'll subtract. 30 subtract 20 is 10. The bigger is negative, so that would be a negative 10. All right, in this example, we have negative 30, negative 50. Okay, we're going to add those. So we're doing this rule. We're adding two negatives. Just add in the usual way, and the answer is negative. So we have negative 80. All right, in this example, we have 50. And we're subtracting negative 20. So we have two subtraction symbols in a row here, or two negative signs in a row. So we will make that 50 plus, again, attach this subtraction symbol to the negative 20. So that would be 50 plus negative negative 20. Well, negative negative 20 is positive 20. Two negatives in a row is a positive. So that's 50 plus 20. So we have 50 plus 20, which is 70. Another way of looking at this is it sometimes pays to remember the following phrase. When we subtract a negative, we end up adding a positive. So in other words, when we have two negatives in a row like this, it turns into a single positive. So subtract a negative. That becomes add a positive. Number 1, we're adding negative 15 plus positive 11. So we're adding a negative and a positive, so we subtract takes on a bigger. Ignoring signs, 15 subtract 11 is 4. And the bigger in absolute value is negative, so that would be negative 4. In number 2, again a positive and a negative, ignoring signs, just subtract. 50 subtract 10 is 40, and the positive is bigger, so that's a positive 40. In number 3, we have positive and negative, so that's ignoring signs, just 20 subtract 8 is 12. 20 is bigger, so that's a positive 12. In number 4, we're adding two negatives, a negative 30 and a negative 20, so we're just going to add in the usual way. So we have 30 and 20 is 50, and the answer is negative 50. In number 5, again, we have two negatives, a negative 35 and a negative 65. Add in the usual way. 35 and 65 is 100, so we have negative 100. Here we have a positive and a negative. Subtract, do 30 minus 20, and we get 10, and since the bigger is negative, that would be negative 10. Here we have a subtraction problem. This is negative 4 subtract 6, so we're going to imagine that it looks like this. Negative 4, negative 6 spread apart, and just picture a faint plus sign in between. So we're going to add a negative and a negative. Alright, so add in the usual way, and that would be a negative 10. In number 8, we're going to do the same thing. We have a negative 50 and we're subtracting 10, so we're going to view this as an addition. And we have this imaginary plus sign in between. So we're going to add these two negatives in the usual way. Negative 50, negative 10 is negative 60. In number 9, we have 10 subtract 30, so we're going to view this as 10 plus the subtraction symbol we're attaching to the 30. And we're going to subtract 30, subtract 10 is 20, and the bigger is negative, so that would be a negative 20. Another way of viewing this is we have, in this example, a smaller number subtract a larger number. So whenever we have smaller minus larger, the answer is negative. So just keep that in mind as well, smaller minus larger is definitely going to be a negative number because you're basically subtracting more than you have. So you end up with something negative. Here's another case where we're subtracting more than we have. We have 2 and we're subtracting 40. Alright, so the answer will be negative. Alright, so I think the best way of doing this is just to subtract and make sure your answer is negative. So we're going to subtract, and when we subtract we have 38, and the answer is negative.